Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. If you are new to this channel and interested in being part of the solution to our education crisis, I hope you'll subscribe to be notified when I make new content or host live shows like this. I'm told by some of my viewers the notifications are not getting to them. So even if you do subscribe and I like to be notified, check back because I do shows at least once a week. Please also like and share this broadcast so others can benefit from the information we're about to share and ask us questions live. Each of these shows is an opportunity to hear from people who are working to improve education in America any way they can. And this one is no exception. Lynne Taylor has been recognized by her peers as an expert in Common Core, career tech education, career pathways, workforce and competency-based education reform, social emotional learning, child abuse, STEM STEAM stream from the UN, and federal overreaches into education and our families. Her work has been recognized and honored by Charlotte Iserbyt, legendary education whistleblower. Lynne humbly carries on Charlotte's mission to expose corruption in not only education, but our nation as a whole. Please join me in welcoming Lynne to the broadcast. Hi, Lynne. How are you?
Hi, Deb. I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I tell you what, the cancer recovery journey is going very well. So thank you so much.
Yay!
Yes,
Awesome.
It is. Okay.
Such good news. And you had a birthday, didn't you?
I did last Saturday. It was the 29th of October. I hit the big 60. And so I got all kinds of cards that told me that now I'm in the cool kids club and, reason to party. And so all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So yeah, I understand
Happy
that you've
birthday.
thank you. I understand you have quite the conversation for us today.
I do.
Okay.
So we know that the NAPE results came out, NAEP testing results came out, was it about a week ago or so?
Mm-hmm.
Really low. I mean, we expected them to be low. We meaning like parents, the nation, et cetera.
Right.
My kids being homeschooled didn't take it, but you know how it is.
Right.
I pay attention. And of course, you
Mm-hmm.
have two dueling narratives. You have the narrative that says it's COVID did it, COVID policies and school shutdowns caused these terrible results. And then the other one is from the teachers union, no, it wasn't that. It was, parents negligent, blah, 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 whatever. So
Right.
bottom line is it comes down to COVID is the big, is the odds on favorite of the parents to blame. But I'm wondering, Lynne, if you can shed some light for us on how much of a role Common Core played. In other words, how much of this was brewing and stewing long before COVID?
Oh, well, thank you so much for asking, Deb. And to answer that particular question, it's been brewing for a very long time. It was always the plan to affect the test scores, to flip them so that those who traditionally who were doing very well with these high stakes, high formative data tracking, career slotting assessments, that they would start to peak and then they would plateau and then they would start to fall. So this has been in the works the entire time. And the reason why I think it's important for us to, first of all, for those who don't understand what NAEP is, it's the National Assessment of Education Progress. Now, NAEP was started by the NCES, or the National, hang on just a second, let me get the name for you, the National Center for Ed Statistics, which is a glorified arm of the IES, which is the Information Education System or Statistics that is housed in the U.S. Department of Education. Now, the NCES, under the Department of Education's tutelage, got in bed with public-private partnerships, meaning the government and the federal funds and the state funds, private corporations, to come about with this test that was supposed to measure Johnny and Susie's ability in two subjects. I believe they were science and history. Now, today, In 2022, the NAEP test, the National Assessment for Education Progress, not only measure all of the subjects, but it marries to the PISA, which is the Program for International Education Statistics run by the United Nations. And the two are aligned just like this to marry to the Common Core. Now, I know I'm taking a long time to answer your question, but I have one more part of history and then we can move forward. Now, the reason why it's important to bring in the PISA and the United Nations, Deb, is because in Barrett Kajos's, and I'm murdering her name, okay? It's BERIT KJOS. She did a booklet called A Common Core for a Global Community. And in that was a timeline history from the 1930s of the progressive movement in America to 2004 and just beyond, when Bill Gates signed an agreement with the UN and UNESCO to create a global common core one world curriculum. And if you'll ever remember his famous quote, it wasn't that Common Core was going to drive the education, it was the assessments would drive the curriculum. And so if we're wondering why they have been ground into oblivion with these poor scores, you can use COVID as the distraction all day long, but it has been the plan all along.
See, and this is how I've been explaining to people, you can get around the Constitution all kinds of creative ways. You just have to want to do it. And to want to do it, that means you have to pretty much not be patriotic, not care about your country, be a globalist, have these kinds of motives in mind. And it sounds like the people, the globalists, the people who believe we should have one world government said, well, here's what we do.
Yeah.
We get a standardized test. Every school district is going to want to do well on it. Nobody's going to want to look like, oh, our students don't do well. So we'll just take the curriculum that gets us there theoretically, except Common Core is not really a curriculum, is it? Can you explain to people what it exactly is and how it works?
It is actually a mandated set of standards that has, yes, infiltrated curriculum and all the resources that go with it. And if you ever doubt my work, you mentioned Charlotte Iserbyt in the opening. I would encourage folks, go to her website, Deliberately Dumbing Down of America, and look at what she's done. Also, I have another book. This is called School World Order by John Kleisick, and I have the honor of knowing John, and he tells you in his book, I'm going to read just a little excerpt about the NAPE, if you don't mind. Okay, he tells you that the U.S. Department of Education was not established until, 1979, because America's progression towards a corporate fascist national education policy could be traced as far back as 1934, Deb, through the publication of a Carnegie Corporation funded study called Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies. This was put out by the American Historical Association. And it goes on to tell you that the implications of education were clear and imperative. The efficient functioning of the emerging economy and the full utilization of its potentialities require profound changes in the attitude and outlook of the American people. So in order to do that, they came up with this national assessment. And that was to help Carnegie feel good about his investment into the U.S. Department of Education.
Yeah, well, this is something I think is really hard for modern day parents to wrap their minds around, is that it's not just their children, but that they were on the same treadmill. We were in this too. And that we were manipulated. We learned differently than our grandparents, for example. And that, or at least mine, my grandfather was born in 1896. So he didn't, go through that. And I think it's really hard for people to comprehend. They're like, why would they want to do that? So can you, give us an example or two of what they meant by change the outlook and mindset of American people? Like what were they
Okay.
trying to change specifically?
Okay, they're trying to change attitudes, values, and beliefs. We have talked about this, I think, on our
Right.
last broadcast through that social and emotional learning, the whole
Right.
child schism, if you will. Because if I can change your values, attitudes, and beliefs to Marxist, fascist, progressive, and collective, you're going to be a much better UN minion than if you stay a free thinking American with a brain that actually can critically think. Now, the NAEP started in 1969. So if you started school after 1969 or you were in school before 1969, that was the first year that this particular assessment was given. And it was to, again, promote, and it says here, it should be noted, the Carnegie metrics for this assessment were a corporate government union
Right.
for workforce schooling that is rooted in the Hegelerian collective philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hegelian. Yeah.
yes, sorry, I knew
No,
I
that's
might
okay.
slaughter that one. That's
No,
okay.
that's all right. Yep. That's no,
That
no, no.
well,
I think
that's
no, but I think
okay.
it's important because I think those of us who are just incredulous
Yeah.
have to also recognize that we got decently educated in spite of this. So
Yeah.
while we were given, some of these ideas,
Hmm.
if we're sitting here thinking, why would anyone want this? Why would anyone want to get rid of our individualism? Why would they want us to be good little minions of the UN? That's because somewhere along the line, we did learn the foundations of liberty and we did learn to appreciate them. And we do understand the incredibly liberating, prosperity inducing potential of the original American mind, the ones that our
Absolutely.
founders set up a system to support. And
Absolutely.
so they as successful as they've been in dumbing us down, they haven't been able to do it perfectly. I mean, so many of us have squeaked through.
Yeah. Yeah, we managed to because we had teachers that still, as you just pointed out, still knew how to educate without conforming to a system. But Deb, those teachers have been weeded out on purpose again
Right.
to prop up the Common Core. Now, in John's book, he quotes Charlotte. Charlotte actually wrote the foreword for his book, and this is from Charlotte's book, her article, "Wake Up Homeschoolers Because They're Coming for Your Children." Charlotte detailed how the high-tech school choice privatization of homeschooling is already being federalized through the incorporation of online charter companies like K-12 Incorporated. And it goes on to tell you that in Charlotte's findings that she found that they were using the NAPE as well in virtual schools, charter schools, and even homeschools get measured, because I have done research where I've looked at the IES, or the Institute for the Education Statistics at the U.S. Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
Homeschoolers are just as data tracked. It's just not that well advertised. But it goes on to tell you that another article that Charlotte did called "The Death Sentence for Private and Home Education, Courtesy of the Supreme Court," tells you that the NAEP is a tool for measuring the accountability. I hope you're ready for this. Not to the parents, not to the taxpayers, okay? But the accountability to politically correct government viewpoints. In fact, 60% of the test items will measure your students' political correctness and their school to workforce training readiness. That's the goal of the NAEP. And it would make sense to marry to the Common Core, to marry to the PISA, to go in with the UN, because after all, it backs up Bill Gates' agreement. And don't think he's not still making money off of everything that happens in education. Elon Musk is another one. Bezos is another one. Every one of these techno-fascist corporate gurus is in on the profit making, and they're using our children as the data widgets through the NAEP, the PISA, and all these other assessments, Deb, to grease their wallets.
I saw something yesterday, Lynn, that I think would have just absolutely made your skin crawl. One of my whistleblowers sent me one of the latest Gates Foundation publication,
Uh-huh.
articles or what have you. And the title of it was, let's see, where was it?
Mhm.
It's called Teachers and Students Are Leading the Way to Better Learning Experiences in Math. And I was, looking at this
Mhm.
like, what do they mean? And this is a Bill
Mhm.
and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they say in Florida, brick and mortar schools reopened well before many other schools across the country, but teachers and students were still feeling the effects of COVID in the 2021-22 school year, blah, blah, blah. It was in this context that 3 teachers applied to join Impact Florida's Solving with Students cadre this spring. They joined 46 others across Florida in piloting an innovative approach to professional learning
Yep.
based on student feedback about the classroom experience in secondary math using a free tool. Of course, they give it away for free. They're going to data mine the
Oh,
living daylights out of these
yeah.
children.
Yes.
And it's called Elevate by PERTS. And PERTS, I can't remember what it stands for, but Elevate is a professional learning program that helps teachers amplify student engagement
Oh,
and
yummy.
enhance academic outcomes. Elevate empowers teachers to discover the practices that best engage their own students. It supports teachers as they use research based professional learning resources and targeted student voice surveys to quickly identify what practices are working well and what can be adjusted for better student engagement and learning. Now, I watched the little video. I
Right.
watched the little video to see what do they mean by student engagement? What does that mean?
Oh,
So they
yes.
take you through the questionnaire. And the
Mhm.
questionnaire to find out if the students are engaged is, I feel that my teacher is happy to see me in class. I feel supported in
Mhm.
class. I feel like I understand this. I feel like my teacher cares about me. All this bleh. Feel. Almost all the questions were how they feel. So this
Right.
isn't just an opinion survey
Right.
about the teacher, but it's about how the teacher makes the child feel. And
With
then the
mhm.
teacher gets spit it out going, your students don't feel appreciated. They don't feel you're teaching in an equitable way. Do this. And the teacher follows, like a good little lab rat, follows the lesson spit out by the Bill Gates little thing.
Yeah, how convenient. That was
Isn't
a
it
lot
amazing?
of that was a lot of words in that description that absolutely explained nothing. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that they love, the Common Core machine, as I call it, loves to do. They'll give you a lot of speakeasy garbage to cover their backside, to not tell you, okay, mom and dad, here's what we're actually doing.
That's
Those
right.
people who are leading your kids have no clue what they're doing because we barely educated them in higher education, but we're going to get spoon feed them a script so they could spoon feed your child character development, and everybody can go home fat, dumb, and happy.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the end game, of course, is not for there to be a United States of America, except in name only, just as like a decoration.
Yeah.
Because we will be so hooked in with international treaties and international obligations and international redistributionist policies that our sovereignty will effectively be gone. We're halfway there now.
We're
So
well over halfway, Deb. I hate to say it, but we are.
yeah,
And when Trump was in office, now another reason why we're hearing a lot about the NAEP scores. Midterm for
of course,
2022
of
is
course.
what, next week? And what
Uh-huh.
do we have? We have all the R versus D rhetoric we could possibly stand. Charlotte nailed it back in 2004, and I have echoed it since. Okay. When it comes to education, there is no difference between the R and the D. So for all those people going, vote red, get a red wave going, save the country because of those other people. And then you hear the other side, get a blue wave going, get a blue wave going. We got to keep the economy going because of those other people. If we would take the time to stop listening to that rhetoric, because we're not electing anyone, because no matter who is selected for us, and they are, Has anything really changed in
No,
education for the better?
no. And not
No.
just education.
Well, I understand, but I know
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
we're speaking on is education. But no,
exactly.
when it comes across the board, it doesn't matter what jersey they have on. It is who is funding them, who's
Yep.
writing the legislation, and where are they profiting. And it will not be because Johnny and Susie need a good education. It will
No.
not be that at all. It will be, I need a good return on my investment because it's all about the money. Why do you think Gates signed that agreement? Why do you think so many people have jumped on his bandwagon to revolutionize education so that it could data mine us to death?
Right. Right. Exactly. And, you know, folks, if you tell these stories to people and they accuse you of wearing a tinfoil hat, or they say, why would they do that, or any number of things, all you have to do is point to the facts.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have to believe what the motives are. Just look at what is.
Look at the
Look at the
documentation.
documentation. Look at the test.
Hmm.
Look who's funding it. Look where the results go. Look at the standards. And I do want you to tell us a little bit more about
Okay.
what that means, because I've tried to explain it before, but you're a much bigger expert on Common Core. Helping people understand what
Okay.
the difference is between a standard and a rubric.
Okay.
So, like, they don't seem to understand.
Okay. From what I have been able to ascertain, when Common Core came along, they were really big on, oh, yes, these standards, the framework for what you have to teach must include A, B, C, and D. Now, what people were not being told was within those standards, Deb, the rubric had already been plotted out for them. So, in other words, if you didn't have any teaching experience whatsoever, supposedly under Common Core, you could go in, crack open a book, look at the standards, see what boxes you have to check, look at how you're supposed to check them, and then, oh, goody, I just not my first day out of teaching. And you think I'm joking, but I'm not, because you look at how underqualified those who are teaching our children have become. This was precisely the point. Give them a script, tell them what to say, when to say it, how to say it, which goes back into what you just said that your whistleblower sent you, which you described perfectly.
Yeah.
Uh, that's precisely what the standards and what the rubric for Common Core will do. They were very famous about going, it covers a mile wide of subjects and it goes further than an inch deep. No, it doesn't, because if you look at the English literature course that I took in high school, okay, way back before dirt was invented, we actually read the entire work of Shakespeare. These kids in the Common Core, the career tech education, the college career readiness, whatever name you want to slap on that pig, they don't get to read the entire work of Shakespeare to understand linguistics,
That's right.
vocabulary,
They
critical
don't.
thinking, context. It is spoon fed to them in phrases. So
Yep.
if anyone had to recite Hamlet's soliloquy today, do you think they could do it?
No,
Probably not.
no.
Not unless they did it on their own. But we had to. And the reason we had to was because we were supposed to understand Hamlet's mindset and why he was going to rule the way he was.
Right.
And it's been long enough ago, I may even have that wrong. But the point of it was that was what we were supposed to do. But we couldn't do it if it had been spoon fed to us or put in phrases. Okay, Deb, you get, to be or not to be. Lynn, you get, that is the question. Because
Right.
by itself, what the heck is that supposed to mean?
Well, exactly. And the other thing is that, people think that's all it takes is like reading a script, but think back to the best teacher you ever had
Right.
and how they operated. Were they reading from a script? Did they just stand up there and go, well, I covered it?
No,
Or
absolutely not.
were they passionate? Did they connect the material to, other material? Did they, dive deep into it and let you really understand and ask a lot of questions? Did you talk about the books you read and so forth? Even with the math, did they make sure you memorize your multiplication tables by the end of third grade? Or were they just like, This is multiplication. Okay, I covered it.
Yeah,
It's
check that
it,
box. Yeah, absolutely.
well, that's
Well,
it.
here's the thing.
Covering something.
You don't learn your multiplications by third grade anymore, my dear. You have to come
No,
to kindergarten knowing multiplication. Are you kidding me? Kindergarten was supposed to be where you learned
that's right.
ABCs, one, two, threes, colors, letters. That was it. Because if you weren't going to do it at home, and I'm for homeschooling, okay? If you
Right.
weren't going to do it at home, you would go to kindergarten. And this was what you would go. You would go there to learn, not come to school ready to learn.
Exactly. Exactly. But at the same time, if you are not so fortunate as to have the kind of home life or,
Right.
attention from your parents or whatever it is, even money to come to school prepared like that, you're SOL. It's not happening.
And I understand there are going to always be children like that. And,
Mhm.
this is where those teachers who knew how to actually put one foot in front of the other and not be thinking with a paper bag over their head,
Right.
this would be where they would come in and they would take that student under their wing and they would give a little bit of extra attention. And,
Right.
when we had small classrooms, that was a great thing. But I don't think we have small classrooms anymore because if you look at the ratios the federal government is throwing out to our states in mandates on what education is supposed to be. Now, this is not teachers, this is going to be with school administration. But for example, I just did a show this morning where we were talking about a federal legislation bill that is very draconian in the mental health overreaches, and it's going to use the school as the hub for the community-wide universal screening for
Oh
mental health
God.
and behavior interventions. I mean, if you want to do a show on that, we can do it. But my point is,
That's a
in this
whole
in this particular piece of legislation, Deb, the ratio of school administration, like for instance, social work, one social worker for every 250 students. Psychologist, one psychologist for every 500 students. Honey, do you know any psychologist who has a caseload of 500 patients?
but now they're going the other way. And
Yeah,
now they're basically turning the schools into, group therapy
absolutely.
24/7. And I'm just waiting for
Absolutely.
them to decide that the community school center thing is going to have a dormitory.
Oh, it
Um,
will. Yeah, because in
yeah.
some states they're already building them and they're like, why in the world are they doing that? Because the whole game plan has been with Carnegie backing, Gates backing, and all these other people that I've mentioned. The whole goal has been to eradicate school boards because if you eradicate school boards, you get rid of the parents. And if we can get rid of the parents on the school board, oh, honey, let's go over here and let's start monkeying with the family and ripping the family apart because after all, look at history, all the regimes, my dear, that said, okay, give me your kid, and in 4 years they won't need a mom and dad because the state's going to be their nanny.
Well,
And
yeah.
exactly, this is precisely why it's going to a a, a public-private partnership route, not a mom and dad, you know what's best.
No, no. But see, they're trying to fool people into thinking because it has the word private in it that it's on your side. No, it's not.
No, it's not. No,
It's on its side.
this is corporate money that's
Yeah.
affecting public interactions, which is
Yeah.
absolutely not in our
I'm all for
Constitution.
capitalism, but that's not what this is.
That's not
This
what
is
this is.
fascism. This
It
is
absolutely is.
corporatism.
Now, you do have a question. It says, is Gates the
Yeah,
main
that's
one,
why I
data
put it up
mining?
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what
Okay. Gates is one, but not the only. The biggest data miner that we have is our federal government. That's it.
Mhm.
Lock, stock, and barrel. And
70
if,
years.
uh-huh.
70 years they're keeping the data. An
Yeah.
entire
Yeah.
lifetime
There
they're
are
keeping your child's
warehouses
data.
in every state that keep up not only with your education data, but your personal private information as data, your
Okay.
credit, your whole, I mean, everything that you could think is your information. No,
Yeah.
they have it. If you play an app on your phone, they're gonna know it, and they're gonna know
That's
how
right.
much you do it because then they can start personalizing what you see. No, it's controlling what you see. This is so 1984 in 2022. It's not
Sure.
even funny. And if you haven't read 1984, it probably would be a good idea to
Be
go
a
read
good
it
time
now.
to do it. I mean, you know what? I rewatched, I've seen V for Vendetta a few times, and I
Oh,
rewatched it
yeah.
recently, and that just gave me chills. I'm like, wait, this was this was not supposed to be like a how-to for, but I mean,
It's
that even started with a virus and everything. Uh,
right.
I mean, this is so frustrating to me because, the more we learn, and I knew, a bunch of this stuff, but again, not to the level that you know it. Um, the more we learn about what's going on, the more instinctive it is, I think, as a parent to want to just disengage, like get yourself, get your kids, get out of there. But then when I bring this up to parents and I explain to them, you see these NAEP results and you see this is just a tiny tip of the iceberg that you can see.
Yeah,
All that you can't see, not because you can't go look for it, it's just you haven't looked for it, you haven't seen it, it's not in your face,
right.
is so massive. And here's why you need to consider leaving and starting something else or doing something else. And then I get the same thing. No, no, no. That's a pipe dream. You're living in a fantasy world.
Mhm.
We need to take back the schools. And I'm like, honey, you never had them.
No,
They were not
we were not.
yours.
Yes, yes, we have never had them. They
No,
were not supposed to be we the people.
no,
They should be, because if you really want to take it back, you're going to have to go all the way back to the one room schoolhouse, because
that's
your
right.
neighborhood absolutely did get together. They hired a teacher who was trained to know how to write and think and do math and read
And
and
could teach each
and
child at
could
the level they were at
ab-
because it was a mixed age
it was a
schoolhouse.
mixed age schoolhouse. And you know
Yep.
what? I've seen many successful homeschooling families before this agenda ground them down, because
Mhm.
it will come after you. If it's not coming through your homeschool resources, it gets you through the assessments. And this has been the warning bell that I have been ringing for years. And I've had homeschoolers tell me, oh, Lynn, it's not going to hit me. I don't need to worry about that Common Core stuff. And I'm like, can
No,
you
it's
read the
everywhere.
writing on the wall? Because, I just read where Charlotte had articles that pointed it out. John has pointed it out in his book. If you go on my blog, commoncorediva.com, type in homeschooling, you're going to find that this has meant to extrapolate every person's data into the same algorithm so that they can be on the blockchain to be controlled by the government, which is becoming techno-fascist, artificially intelligence incentivized, to the point that they're recreating a Bill of Rights, Deb, with artificial intelligence as the foundation.
Yeah, and they want a
Yeah.
right to read, which of
Oh,
course is
yeah.
just not even what it sounds like at all.
Right.
Um, I think first of all, somebody asked the
Yes.
book that you keep referring to. Tell me the
Yes.
title again so I
Okay.
can write that
All right.
down.
I don't know if it's going to show up since I have my screen on, but it's called
School.
School World Order. And I don't know if you can see the image, but he has a brain on the cover, and hooked to the brain are some of the wires from all the artificial intelligence and the data collecting. Now, John wrote this very recently. So if you think it's, way back when, no, it's not. He wrote this in 2018, and it's on its second printing. No, actually, I think it's well past its second printing. The second printing was in 2019, but it's big, and it's recent enough that Betsy DeVos and all her agenda is roped into this as well.
Oh, okay. So those of you who are interested in the topic of school choice, if
Oh,
you're not new to my channel, well my
uh,
skepticism. It's infamous at this point. But if you're new to the channel and you're like, what's wrong with school choice? Isn't that a good thing? It's like, we just told you the
there
entire
is
education
no,
system, top to bottom, is completely corrupted. That
yeah,
means these public-private partnerships that are, making it possible, the private schools, et cetera, the ed tech firms, and the government that will still be funding it. Remember,
yep,
school choice is still, yeah, no, we're still taking your taxes. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
We're not letting you just keep that. We got this. We'll redistribute as we see fit. Thank you very much for your
And then we'll tell you how
participation.
to use it.
Yeah, and then here's the list of the ways you can use it. Right now, it's a little short list to make you feel all safe and cozy and everything. So you make commitments and you make changes and you move and you apply to schools and your kids get all attached in the school community. And then we'll come in and we'll attach more regulations, as time goes on and you stop paying close attention. But we realize right now you're paying very close attention. So we're going to be like, what regulations? What? No, there's just like these two right
Right.
here. That's nothing, right?
Right. And one of the last things that Charlotte was working on, Deb, and I think I've brought this up with you, is that she had been able to do enough research and she left enough of a paper trail that I've been able to pick up on it, where the goal for school choice is not to let mom and dad have more freedom. Okay. It's not that at all. It is actually a way to totally eradicate all forms of private education, including homeschooling, to shut it down, to rebrand it as public, thereby putting it under a federal thumb with a national school board. So all those years that Lamar Alexander was joking about the government didn't have a national school board, he was lying to your face, because that was his plan. See, he's been in on this school choice bandwagon since the 70s. And he was one of those idiots who sat in that particular meeting when that national Council for Education Statistics was even dreamed up as a public-private partnership.
And then, like you said, public private. So that means the government's got the data, but how many private entities get to have it too? There are so many private entities you did not personally give permission to that have your child's data and will store it and sell it and do whatever with it. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't even ask to look at what they've got. I want to read something to you that comes out of an article that somebody sent me the other day. This article was published in the Future Freedom Foundation. There were two articles. One is called School Vouchers Are Anti-Libertarian, and the other one was called More Anti-Libertarian School Vouchers. But this is a little excerpt. It says, consider 19th century slavery. Suppose there was a large libertarian movement back then in the state of Alabama. Conservative-oriented or reform-oriented libertarians say, we will never abolish slavery. It's in the Constitution. Most people will never go along with abolition. We've got to be practical and pragmatic. We've got to promote and support such reform measures as fewer lashings, reduced working hours, better food and health care, and better working conditions. Some conservative-oriented libertarians even come up with a plantation voucher program that gives slaves choice with respect to which plantation they choose to work on.
Oh my God.
And I realize the analogy is a bit extreme, but it's extreme on purpose to get you to realize.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
This is what you're talking about. I want to choose my child's daily prison cell. That's all.
Yeah, well, when I've explained it, I've used coupons because I know how many of us love to think we're saving money and the scam behind a coupon. I mean, but Charlotte was brilliant in finding that the vouchers, the education savings accounts, are nothing more than a way to kill all private education. And with the private education comes the school board. And if we eradicate the school board, we don't need the parents' voice, which marries right into the techno-fascist plan. Because if you look at their very stair-step system, killing the school board is right in the middle. Adopting Common Core came right before it. And then right after it, it was skill-based learning. And we were going to sell it as school choice. So it doesn't matter if you're conservative, liberal, if you think you're still on the red team or the blue team, doesn't matter, because both sides support it. And what they're supporting is workforce servitude. Is exactly what they are, because you will not get the choice of where you work or who you work for, because those assessments will slot you. I mean, think about this. The NAEP 60%, Deb, political correctness.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and John Gates makes the point, school choice would also bypass things like the Constitution. The government can't violate the Constitution, but private entities can do whatever they want. Absolutely. And nowhere is this more obvious than in a private school contract.
Yep.
If you are
Absolutely.
unfamiliar with enrollment contracts that parents are forced to sign today, even for schools that charge as high as 60 grand a year, like the Tony private schools in New York City,
Right.
they sign away their civil rights. They
They do.
sign away their right to free speech. They can't criticize the school. They can't question the school. They
Mhm.
can't forget school board meetings or nobody even knows how the private school boards are made up. Nobody knows how people get onto these boards. It's a
They're
mystery.
usually appointed, and it's the who do you know game, or what business
But
do
it's
you
not
represent?
transparent.
Right,
And it's
it's
certainly
not.
not at the parents and people say, but we're paying. And I'm like, they don't care.
No,
They
they
don't
absolutely
care.
don't. They absolutely
No.
don't. That's a very good point, John. Thank you so much for that, because that is spot on. It absolutely is. And I will tell you, if you think that not being able to vote for your school board member is a bad thing, that's just the beginning, because
Mhm.
the entire goal behind school choice is to eradicate your right to vote in any election. And this was one of the things that I said, when Charlotte passed, I'm like, we have to get this out, because what are we hearing leading up to 2024? We have to vote a certain way to save the country, because if we care about the country, that's the way we'll vote. Again, the people put in the offices are not elected, they are selected.
Yeah,
They
pretty
absolutely are.
much.
And they are not even selected in the United States where they will serve. They are flown to there's a group, all those groups of 20, all those business leaders, all those little private entities where they're all the global
GH, blah,
minions.
blah.
Yeah.
Yep.
hmm
Those are the
Yeah,
people who really control it.
they
And
are. They are. They absolutely are.
I mean, a friend of mine used to say, and I used to kind of chuckle and think he was only half serious, but now I realize he was 100% serious.
Oh,
If
yeah.
voting mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. Like,
And,
at this point, I'm not
right,
sure how far back we have to go, but the simple fact is that
right,
we really, from the earliest part of the 20th century forward, and probably in the latter part of the 19th, we ceased to be what the founders wanted us to be, because people
right.
figured out right quick
hmm
how to circumvent the protections and the guardrails through, as you're describing, these public private partnerships. And
Right.
there were a couple of phases where it really took off. I mean, you've got, Woodrow Wilson, you've got FDR, you've got, on into the
hmm
20th century. It really ramped up in the 60s like
Oh, yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But the ideas have been here. The ideas came from Europe. They didn't come from
hmm
here. They
That's
just were
right.
adopted by people here, because there were always people here, especially rich people in urban, enclaves, that had an inferiority complex, just like the Tories did when the king was still in charge. They had an
Right.
inferiority complex, that they weren't European, that they weren't, didn't have fancy accents and degrees from Oxford. And so they wanted so badly to be in with these, old
Mhm.
world moneyed old people. So what do you want us to do? How do you want us to? We want to be in your club. How do we get these
Yeah.
country bumpkins over here and flyover country to do what we want? Because they're just so,
Yeah.
unruly.
It's money and control. And so our government has ceased to be we the people. It has
Yeah.
become what's in it for me.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
precisely it. So,
And we see it. We saw it during COVID with the
mhm,
disdain and the
mhm,
disgust. We heard it first with the
mhm.
deplorables.
Oh,
Basket of the first was the clingers, the
yeah.
bitter clingers. Then we were the deplorables. Then we were the anti-vaxxers and the, whatever.
Yeah.
But so when people today say, "Oh, it's COVID that caused the low test scores," do you just laugh?
BS,
Do you just
BS,
laugh at this?
BS.
I mean, I don't mean to, it's not funny, but I mean,
No,
it's ridiculous.
okay, but we're reaping what we've sown.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that we is because all those years ago, when the warning bells were going off and certain people were sharing the truth, what did mainstream do? Shut them down. What did local leaders do? Silence their voices.
That's
And
right.
so all that warning that had worked for so many years, because this was not the first time that this kind of agenda was trotted out, but we had parents who actually gave a fig what happened.
That's
But
right.
we've had things culturally shift, and the reason they have culturally shifted is because what has been taught. And
right.
what has been taught became the foundation. This is why the UN picked on education, because they knew it was the number one change agent of an entire culture. And it's not just our culture, because this is not exclusive to America. Remember, this is a global common core. So every country that's a first world country, second, third, whatever, doesn't matter.
They're seeing this in
They're
Singapore.
seeing
They're
this
seeing
everywhere.
gender theory in
Mhm,
Singapore. Let that sink
mhm.
in. You get caned for chewing gum in Singapore, or used
Yep,
to. I don't know if you do anymore. And it was like last year it wasn't there. This year it's there. It's
it
so
is. It
fast.
absolutely
So
is,
fast.
because you have to take an entire world's population, Deb, conform them to this one world way of living and doing and thinking, or else you have tyranny. And those
Right.
people like us who are the nonconformists, we will be on the front lines, probably taking the first shots. But that's, and I mean, bullets, not anyway. Point of it
So
is,
be it. I mean, at least,
yeah,
I mean,
point
I
of
don't
it
want to hang
is,
around with the zombies.
yeah,
Um,
point of
I
it is you have to stand up, even if it means sacrificing right now, because you're sacrificing to protect your family. You're
right.
sacrificing to protect your country and its way of life that we should have, not what the corporations have turned it into.
That's right. And it's an illusion, this idea of convenience and safety and all of these
Mhm.
things that they claim to offer. They really don't, because the one thing we did see during COVID, and I hope that we learned from, is that when your society is organized around government is your caretaker,
Yeah.
government protects you,
Mhm.
they have a kill switch. They can shut everything down. So all those
Mhm.
conveniences, all the things that you think that, like, oh, this is so great that everything is connected and it's technologically wonderful. Yeah, and all they need to do is flip one switch and you got nothing. They're
Yeah.
already moving in Europe to a digital currency, no cash whatsoever. They want to do the same to us. That we're maybe a year or two away from that. And
Right.
then when it's completely technological, you're at the mercy. You're completely look at California. They own the power making ability, right?
Mhm.
Simultaneously telling you you can't have a gas car after a certain point. But guess what? You can't charge the car we're going to make you buy if we say you can't. If you cannot get around,
Yep.
they own you. At what point do you decide I'm already not free? I'm already owned. I'm already a slave.
Right.
And so the reason education is so bad is you don't own it and
Right.
you never did. There's no
Right.
taking it back. What you can take back are your children. Your
Mhm.
children still, to my knowledge, I have to go check my notes, but they still tech technically belong to you. I don't feel
Well,
like
there are
property
people
should
out
be.
there to change that. They
They're trying
absolutely
to,
are,
yeah,
and they come from the government. So when they come knocking on the door going, "Hi, we're from the Department of Education and we're here to help," you need to cite your Fourth Amendment and slam the door in their faces. You
that's
absolutely
right.
do.
That's
Because,
right.
we and you're right, we live in the largest open air prison on the face of this planet, and we have for
Right.
years.
That's right. It's a rather comfortable
Well,
prison.
of
So a lot
course.
of people,
We've been
yeah,
lobsters who've been boiled, honey.
right.
Frogs in the pot, and those
And
frogs that
and
are
all
the
of this
yep.
is because if they learned the lessons of history is that all of those other tyrants, they moved too quickly and things got
Mhm.
really ugly and messy and they didn't have staying power. So what they learned is, like you said, how to boil the frog or boil the lobster.
Yep.
So you don't have to pile up bodies.
Who
No,
needs
we can
that? That's so
stay,
old-fashioned.
we can make do with prisons, and we can just
Yeah.
make do with prisons and restrictions and limitations. And I really think that COVID policy, to a large degree, was a test of that
You
very
know,
system.
it was one of the first tests of the success of the USMCA, the United States Mexico Canada Agreement. And the reason I know that is because in the agreement that Trudeau signed and then the Mexican president signed, as well as Trump, it was the agreement. That's not what became law. What became law, Deb, was the congressional bill to put all the motions in place to carry out the USMCA, and written in those parameters to carry out this agreement which has really no legal binding in our nation, but we have people who've kowtowed to it, was the government by way of all the different committees that were formed. And there is a picture on my blog, and you can type in USMCA and I think you can find it. But anyway, it shows you the USMCA, and then there's a committee literally for almost everything we do in life. There's a committee for education, labor, healthcare, you name it. Okay. Point of it was between that committee and the agreement superseding the US Constitution and our form of government would be who got to stay open and who got to shut down. So you want to know why Amazon and Walmart made bukus of money while we were all being told you
Well,
can't
they were
do
obviously
anything?
on the nice list.
That's right. And mom and pop stores were not.
Naughty list.
That's right. But it also goes on to tell you that under the government control at the steering of these international committees, because let's face it, Canada and Mexico are not America. They happen to be on the continent, but they are not our country. So that it makes it international. But don't think they'll stop with just Mexico and Canada. No, because the group of 20 is roped in, the group of 7, the G8, any other one that you could possibly alphabet soupize into this council for everything we do that surrounds the USMCA will decide. And written into it is how much education each person will get, what level of job they will get. And if you think that I have a tinfoil hat on, no, it's a tiara, and I'm not smoking dope. I have seen the legislation. I have done shows on it. I have done research on it. And I'm here to tell you that is precisely what is in that. So yes, COVID was a test.
Yeah, I really believe that. And so, we've got to, the other day, that Professor Emily Oster, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. She's like, let's have an amnesty for COVID and forgive each other. And I'm like, I'm sorry, wait, I didn't do anything that needed to be forgiven. You and your little friends, on the other hand. But I really think this, whether it's education or economic policy, I mean, they all go together, to your point.
Oh, yeah.
Because the education changes the attitudes, and the number one attitude they have to change is that we are a sovereign nation, that we are independent, that we value our independence, that we're individualists, that we have a live and let live attitude, that we don't want to be controlled by micromanaging central planners, that all of these things that these committees and these organizations overseas, these globalists want, are when we use the term anti-American, we're being literal. There is something to the American culture, the American way of life, the American, set of laws. All of it is unique in all the world. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It is. The fact that they're ignoring it is the problem, but it's still unique. Right. And they have got to get us to a point where we don't appreciate it. We don't know what it is. Then we can't appreciate and defend it. And then it just goes away.
And
just
we're well on our way.
Goes away. And we just become another state in the GU. Yeah. The global United States of the world, or whatever it is.
Right. Whatever they'll brand us as. But no, we're well on our way. We absolutely are, because and this is why education was chosen. It absolutely was. And, it was maniacal brilliance that thought that up. And I hate that that's what that person's brilliance was used for, because think of, had they had a good idea that could have really benefited the world.
I don't even know that it takes genius. It just takes somebody reading an Ian Fleming novel. I mean,
well, okay, fine. Maybe they weren't.
No, but I'm saying, I get what you're saying. But what I'm saying is, part of why I'm so baffled by all the people who are like, that couldn't happen. I'm like, why do you think it's so far-fetched? If somebody could dream it up as fiction,
yeah,
okay, and they could make it look, plausible as far as spy stories or Tom Clancy or whatever, what makes you think it couldn't happen in real life? And they go, well, so many people would have to be including. Not at all. Not at all. You don't need to have so many people. You actually need very, very few who actually know what's going on, because the dominoes fall where they may. Once you understand and you you control the means of communication, you can control the data, you control the moving parts. This is what they want. They want us to be so predictable.
Yeah.
okay, with their little algorithms and data mines, whatever, that they can say something. There is a crisis of blah, 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 and predict with like 90% accuracy how 90% of people
Mm-hmm.
will react. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe they've gotten to a point in their big data analysis where they have it to where they're like, we've got it. We've got a minority. We've reached
Mm-hmm.
minority status on the part of the people who will fight back. We've won. And the proof to me was COVID. I was sitting there holding my breath day one. And I said, I think they're going to lock us down. Before it was anyone's talking about lockdowns, I
Right.
said, I think. And when my husband and I were back and forth, he says, American people won't stand for that. Americans, what? I'm like, I think we
Oh, it was
passed the,
amazing how many people just
I
mindless
think,
idiots.
yep.
Yeah.
And what happened was that was the confirmation, all the confirmation I needed that they have won. The they being the globalists, the people
Mm-hmm.
who want us to cease being America as we once were, as we still, I think, were on 9/11, gone, because our will to defend our own our rights, our will to, over what, a cold virus. It'd be like, oh, COVID's serious. Yes, I know, it's a bioweapon. It was manufactured in a lab. It is serious, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a crisis to the level that they said it was. That was a lie, and everything else followed from
Yeah.
that lie. Everything.
Absolutely. And
And
anything that has attached itself to education in the name of that is also something that is not truthful at all. It
that's
absolutely
right.
is. It
And
absolutely is.
John is correct here. The rats and cities fell hook, line, and sinker. They did. I
Yep.
know that but he said teachers are convinced by whom that they're doing the right thing. How did that happen? That
That would be the influence of the teachers unions. It
Yep,
would be also the influence of the politicians and the
yep,
laws that are written. For example, we both live in North Carolina. Go look at what the General Assembly trots out for teacher pay. Go look at the strings that come with it. So it's not
yep,
just
yep.
the corporations. It is the politicians.
That's why I said we've gotten past
Excuse
that
me.
tipping point where the average American
Mhm.
is actually okay with it. They're like, "What's your big problem with the global? So what's the problem?
Oh
Why
well,
wouldn't we
we
want?
need to we
Wouldn't it
need
be
to
more peaceful if we were all just one big government?" I'm like, "Oh my god!"
Well, think
So
about the founding principle that it was supposed to be limited. This is
mhm.
not limited. This is off the chains.
Yeah, but they don't. They don't. I was watching a sort of a docudrama series on the revolution the other night,
Mhm.
and we were just at the first episode, and it's where they have actors playing the founders are sitting there talking to the camera, and we're at the stage prior to the declaration. We haven't even gotten to the declaration. We're
Right.
still at like intolerable acts kind of low. We're down in here, and I'm watching these dramatizations of, they're reading actual primary documents. So they're just
Mhm.
dramatizing, and they're like, this is an outrage. This is slavery. And they're talking about like a stamp tax. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh, how far we have fallen. If
Oh
these people
yeah.
could see us today, they would be so ashamed.
Oh yeah.
And it's just it's so sad. And all I can tell you is, audience, that it's real. Education is kind of like a canary in the mine shaft, in the sense
Yeah.
that when you see these, like the NAPE test or whatever, that's your giant, it's not just a canary, it's like a giant red warning flag going, get out.
It's Big Bird.
It's it because your kids will be your jailers. So as bad as things are now, as if you think things are bad now with like them collecting your data and doing all this stuff, wait until the little revolutionaries that are currently in kindergarten, if they make it all the way through this process without us pulling enough of them out to like stand guard, they're going to make Mao's little red army look benign.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's
Hitler's youth reinvented. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
really do not want to see the Lord of the Flies nightmare that is going to be. I see little bits of it, little peeks at it
Mhm.
here and there when I see little student activist organizations, or somebody will send me a video about like, our voice, youth in America, whatever. And I'm just like, my blood runs cold,
Yeah.
because
It,
these
it
kids are as
it's
ignorant as the day is long. They know
They're
nothing about anything.
lemmings. they're becoming lemmings, and
They're
it's not
cannon fodder is what they
yeah,
are.
it's not reserved for any one age group, because remember, this is
Yeah,
supposed to be going after cradle to grave.
that's right.
There's a show I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks where, Mark Tucker's dream for having older people
Right.
back in the workforce. Well,
Yeah,
what are we trotting out in America? But that same thing. So this
that's
would
right.
be what Charlotte and so many others like her have said: the cradle to grave system that will do nothing but dumb you down, to grind you down, to
That's
be
right.
their fodder, not
Right.
your freedom.
So the way out is out, in my personal opinion. I mean, even if it's one kid at a time, I've said it many times on the channel, like, get out. We need parallel system. We need a parallel education system. And as long as they're not going to literally stop us from doing it yet, we need to build critical mass in that direction. And I just would love to encourage people listening to this that, don't wait for it to call out to you.
Right.
You get out with your kid, or you figure it out, find a couple neighbors, figure out what you have to do. But this is literally a life and death situation for your child, because the people who will still be okay, I really believe this, they're trying to get the masses, and they will
Mhm.
succeed. They are succeeding, as a matter of course, of deciding who gets what job and who's going to live how. Okay.
Right. Mhm.
But there will still be people who got educated on their own, figured things out on their own, were homeschooled, and or somehow, in spite of everything, parents' involvement, whatever,
Right.
came out okay. And those little independent souls, those people who are like, I'll manufacture my own work, I'm going to work with another group of people, we're going to do a little underground economy over
Right.
here,
Mhm.
they're going to do that. So that will exist. There hasn't been a tyranny ever that there wasn't a black market, there wasn't another
Yeah,
way of surviving.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so think of it that way. It's not that you're going to open up your homeschool or start your micro school and suddenly save America. That's not what's going to happen. What you're going to do is you're going to save your family. You're going to give your kids a shot at having a semi-normal life within this open air prison. Because I really think if you're not bothering them, it's kind of like the mafia. Like, if you're
Yeah.
not bothering them, they're probably not
Mhm.
going to bother you. As long as they're getting their tax revenue from their
Mhm.
people, you figure
Mhm.
out your ways and your little hand hidey holes. It's going to be like more like Hunger Games and, the like District 12, where they're just like hiding or whatever. But that's what you got to think about, is think down the road to, how do I want my kids to be able to live um, completely on their own without having to interact with any of this.
Yeah.
And if they're in the schools, they're already at a deficit. That's going to be much harder.
Right. And the one thing that I would urge folks to do is, if you are going to pull a child, no matter what their age, out of a public system, don't throw what you think is public education at them the minute they get home.
Oh God,
I've
no.
mentored many, many families who have gone from the public system into a homeschooling environment. And one of the best things you can do is reconnect with that child, help them get their head back in a place that reflects the family values that you have them have an opportunity to go take some sleep, because let's face it, the school schedule is meant to wear them out, to respond to bells, to respond to buzzers, and you need time to decompress and reunite.
That's
And
right.
many homeschool families have failed, Deb, because mom or dad, one or the other, was so convinced that the public system was the only way, that, oh no, we can't take a month off. We can't have Johnny and Susie rest up, and oh, we'll fall
Still
behind.
fall behind. I'm
Behind,
like, behind
behind.
who?
Yeah, what does it matter? If it saves your child, okay,
Yeah.
if sleep deprivation is so bad that it saves your child from making a poor choice, would you not give a rat's bottom where everybody else is and look at your child? Of
You can
course
also
you
make
would.
up so much ground in such a short period of
You
time.
absolutely can. I homeschooled all three of my girls 23 years, from as early as I could to as late as I could. And I'm going to tell you what, we got more done in those years towards their education, so that by the time, and I'm not bragging, but I'm just trying to throw this out there so people can see how successful it was.
Yeah.
uh, I had my youngest was, I think it was a fifth grader, and we had to go do the annual testing because here in North Carolina, you do have to have a nationally normed assessment, which is
Yes,
our
you do.
one snag for Common Core, because of course those have been aligned. But
That's
this
right.
was before this. Anyway, the point of it is, in fifth grade, she was at a college sophomore reading level. Because what did we do? We read, and we read
That's right.
voraciously, and we read everything that we possibly could. All those classics that you're told, oh, you can't read that. You might be able to think your way out of a paper bag. We read them. Uh, we have scores of families with examples like that. Now, yes, in this day and age when everything is aligned and data mined, it will be hard. It's not impossible, but aren't your children worth impossible?
Absolutely.
Aren't they worth being hard? Aren't they worth sacrificing? And that's
Yeah.
precisely what we did. Was we sacrificed my work life, my income, and have been a one income family for years
Right.
because we wanted to invest in the family more so than invest in the school. And don't think
Right.
I didn't get the argument, oh, Miss Taylor, do you know how much you're depriving your school district by not having your children enrolled in school?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not a broodmare for the state. Just saying. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just
I
not my
know.
job.
And I
Go
look at,
tell somebody who's childless to not have that abortion. Okay,
yeah,
moving on.
and so I told the person when they said that, I said, okay, fine. Maybe that's what I'm costing your school. But think about this, the flip side. How much money am I going to save the school
Right.
by having them home? You have
That's
to
right.
flip the argument to beat them at their own game. That you can still do.
I mean, funny story about the reading. You talked about your daughter was reading at college level, whatever.
Right.
My daughter, when she was about, I guess it would be like 7, I think
Mm-hmm.
7, and I went within a couple months, not
Mm-hmm.
exaggerating. I went from being in despair that my 7-year-old wasn't reading yet. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'd
Right.
surrounded her with books and she was like barely sitting up. And she went from like, no, mama, I can't read. No, mama, I can't read. No, and then like came to me one day, like, do we have any more of those Jack and Annie books? The Magic Tree House. She's, I've read
Right.
them all, like the whole collection. I
Oh,
bought used.
see?
She read them all,
Yeah.
and then within like a month, it was like a scary fast how it happened. She had plowed through like the whole bookshelf, all
Yeah.
the Rick Riordan books, all the Harry Potters, all the like. And I was just like, oh
Right.
my god, I'm going to the used bookstore. I'm trading in books. I'm getting books, and we got to a point where Mama was tired, not paying close attention, too busy running around trying to get more. We're at the library every week, like this many books.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah. Mhm.
I wasn't paying very close attention. And she grabbed a book off the shelf that I thought was in the children's department. Had cats on the front. It said something about the cat of something something. And I was like, oh, that's cute. It was like a novel, paperback.
Yeah.
And then she loves to tell me now, because I didn't know this at the time. She didn't say anything. She says, yeah, mom, you weren't paying attention. And because of you, I saw porn. I'm like, I'm sorry, about what?
What? Oh,
She
my.
said she was reading this book and she's coming upon something. She goes, what does that mean? And my kids knew how to use the internet to look up words, like
Oh,
dictionaries or look up
no.
terms. So one day I must have been busy cooking or doing something. And she's like, can I use the computer to look something up? And she looks up one of the terms she read in this paperback that had a cat on it that I thought was a
Oh,
children's, not or,
no.
a young adult book.
Yeah, yeah.
And it turns out that she's so she goes, oh my God. Like it was a big, and then but she didn't tell me this occurred for years. And then she
Oh,
told me
well,
the
yeah.
story and she said, yeah, that book, mom, that book's not a young adult book. That's an adult, like romance novel kind of thing. And I was like, why did it have pictures of cats on the front? Like, why? She's like, well, the lady, she did also had a picture of a lady in a gown. Just like, you fixated on the cat. And I was like, I thought it was a
Oh,
princess who
my
had cats.
stars.
So it was,
Oh,
your kids can get reading so fast at a
yeah.
young age that you like have to really scrutinize the books they're getting at the
Right,
library, or they
right.
might grab something inappropriate. And that happened without me. Like I said, I read to her, like you said. And it's not rocket science. Unless your child has an organic issue, if there's like dyslexia, there's something going on. But
Mhm.
for most children, the vast, vast majority of children, reading is fundamental. It's something that when they're surrounded by it and they're read to, and you
Yeah.
sit with them and you use your finger, it doesn't take a genius or a master's degree or anything to do this. And
No.
yet somehow these systems have convinced parents that they are incapable, that if the government doesn't take care of it or some other
Mhm.
entity that
Mhm.
costs a lot of money, their children will never read. Meanwhile, kids are going to school and, as the NAEP shows, are illiterate
Yeah. Absolutely.
despite all of that.
Well, because Common Core cut out phonics that work and went to sight words. And Deb, sight words were never supposed to be how you learn to read.
No,
You can't
no.
put the
Those are
cart
just the
before the
words you
horse.
literally can't sound out, like
We're-
the.
but this is what happened. This is how it turned reading on its head. And the science of reading that the state has latched onto is our state, North Carolina, has latched on, is an absolute joke. You know, when Johnson rolled it out as superintendent of public instruction, people told him, dude, it's not going to work. Guess what?
Is
We're
this
under
blended reading,
Truett.
like whole
Yeah,
word garbage?
we're
Oh my
under
God.
Truett now. And what is she doing? She's still sticking with it because, after all, we've got all the funding for it. So why not? And they have regimented schedules for when children should read. If my children had gone through that, I'm not sure what label they would have gotten, because not everyone can read at the same age, but you're
No.
expected to. Not everyone can write at the same age, but you're expected to.
Can
And
you
you're
imagine if my
somehow.
daughter had been in the public school and had
Mhm.
arrived at second grade not reading? It would have been this whole full court press of like, oh my God, she's retarded. I
Mhm.
mean, who knows what they would have said.
Miss
Meanwhile,
Philman, we have to have a meeting because, after all, your
oh,
daughter can't do this and can't do that, and then
can't
you
do
could.
this, can't do that.
Yeah.
She'd be stigmatized, all these things.
Oh,
Meanwhile, the kid goes on within a span of a month to become like super reader.
yeah.
And,
Right.
that wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't happen. And my next one, younger than her, had the same kind of experience, although she started reading earlier. So, like you
Okay.
said, same family,
Yeah, same
two
family,
different
but
kids.
different. Yeah.
One just didn't want to let me know. She told me later, she said, I could read before them, but I didn't want to tell you because I couldn't do it perfectly. And there's some children have a
Right.
personality that until they can do something really well, they don't want to do it. Meanwhile, her younger sister was like, like sounding out every little
Yeah.
letter from the age of
Yeah.
4, and was the same caliber of reader by 7 easily. But my youngest, who had to start in the public schools, same situation. She, 6, not reading. She probably was following her sister's footsteps, but was she allowed to? No.
Right.
She wasn't allowed to take her time. It was like, oh, we have issues, we have problems, we have this. To this day, hates reading. Same
And
family,
see, that's
same
a
parents,
crime.
same
That
bookshelf.
right.
Oh,
But
please
that's
don't think I haven't had all kinds of guilt and sleepless nights. I didn't want her to go in that school, but I didn't have a choice. And
right.
this is why I tell people, like, it's them, because
Mhm.
here I am, produced 2 avid readers without a whole ton of effort, just didn't have them in the school, put
Right.
one in the school, doesn't like to read.
And that's a shame, because you're right. Reading is a foundation that we have to have for so many of the other things that we go on to do: writing, thinking, creativity, which really cannot be taught. I mean, let's
Right.
face it, but that's an argument that's being brought up, and it will somehow tie to, oh, yes, well, because the test score showed that, this is low, we need to have classes on it. I'm sorry, there are
Yeah.
certain things you cannot have classes on. There are just certain things about the way we are wired and
Yeah.
made that you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, you have all these other things that you can do.
That's right. That's right.
But
So,
that's individuality, Deb, which is against all of this.
well, you can't have that, because if you have individuality, then you can't be, part of the group. You can't be an activist. You can't see yourself as part of an identity collective, like
Yeah.
social emotional learning wants me to be. I mean, you're absolutely right. This
Yeah.
is a concerted effort to do this. And I think the hard thing for me is that I'm starting to, as I said, with COVID, I realized that we've
Mhm.
reached the tipping point where most Americans are okay with it. And every day I encounter people who act like wanting to preserve that individualism, that American spirit is bad. It's not just something they don't value, they
Right.
see it as actually bad.
Oh, it's
They
become toxic. Yeah.
right, Big Brother has successfully turned war into peace
Oh, yeah,
in their
absolutely.
minds.
And it's
Slavery
a
into freedom, blah blah
mhm,
blah blah. Oh, that's it.
mhm.
And here we are. So that's why I say I've kind of, in order to maintain my own sanity, what I've decided is not so much to give up, because that's going too far. It's to
No.
say redirect. So like redirect your energy, redirect your frustration into building, redirect it into
Mhm.
getting your kids out, building your family, building your community, building your associations with other people who are like-minded, and you know, be free. So if they want to try to stop you, you have to say good luck. I mean, really, you just you go ahead and you live free and you do the things you need to do that, as long as they're letting you. Don't wait for an engraved invitation. Go do it. Like Lynn is saying. If you can't, when they're still letting you homeschool. Someday they might not let you, but the more of us who are doing these things, the more difficult, it's sand in their gears, the more difficult it's going to be to shut down the homeschools. Don't take
Right.
voucher money. Don't take ESA scholarship money.
Right.
Don't let the government get its hooks into you, because it's a lot harder to corral people
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
scattered to the four winds than it is to keep people locked in a cage they voluntarily put themselves in.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I would take it one step further. Taxation funds our local schools.
That's correct.
If you don't like what's going on in the local school, don't go to the school saying, I need to see what you're teaching, because you'll only get to see it. Will you get to change it? No, you have to go through all kinds of rigmarole to
Yeah.
get to change that curriculum, and good luck with that. But what you
Mhm.
can change is the taxation. What you can affect is hit them where the wallet is.
That's right.
And we would have to do that in mass, Deb, because if only one or two people, well, I'm going to, go after the taxation. I'm going to stop paying taxes, or I'm going to,
You'll go to
you know,
jail.
you, they will make an example out of
No,
you.
we
But
need
if
we need
you,
a tax strike. Mhm.
if you took enough people in mass
Yep,
to say, we will stop funding
that's right.
these politicians, we will stop funding these bureaucrats in our schools through taxation, you could start to really make a difference locally. And
That's right.
that's where I'm going to leave it.
I'll finish with just one other thought, which is that if all else fails and you just are not in a position to leave or take these big steps, then at a minimum, set an example to your children of being ungovernable in this respect. You can't change the curriculum. You probably can't get books out of the library, all that kind of stuff. They have broad latitude to leave them there, all these things. But what you can do is you can ask a lot of questions, and you can assert your own views, and you can stand by them proudly, and don't let anybody make you feel like you have to shut your mouth, or you can't, stand up for what you believe. And keep reinforcing that message to your kids, so that if they are in school, I mean, this is
Mhm.
one benefit of government school, right? Is one benefit is that you do still, at least for the moment, have rights there, and your child has more rights than you do. If your child, if they're old enough, like sixth grade or so, even fifth grade, to speak up and ask questions, to challenge the teacher, to say, I don't agree with that, as long as they're civil, that's a way of fighting back. And don't get too fussed about their grades. The teacher wants to retaliate and gives them a C because they, asked questions about some curriculum or other. Make sure you just reassure them it's not the end of the world. What's the worst thing that can happen? They can't go to a communist university? Ooh, bummer.
Yeah.
There's other things you should be doing about that anyway. So that's just my last little thing, is to it's not all lost if you can't leave today. Just be smart about how you fight back. So Lynne, I can't thank you enough for coming back in and talking to us,
Oh, no
sharing your
problem.
wisdom.
Oh, no problem. And if you want to talk about HR 7780, we will absolutely do that. That was the bill I was referring to, but I
Yep.
do need to get going.
I
Okay.
know, same.
All
So
right.
thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Have a great
All right. Thank
afternoon.
you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Deb, I got to go. One of my kids.